Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining the Injury Prevention Plus Safe Environment for Every Kid, or SEEK QI program. We are launching the second action period call for Wave 6. Can't believe that it is February already. Again, welcome in. We always want to thank our program partner, the Ohio Department of Health, and the Violence and Injury Prevention Section, or VIPS. And today's agenda, again, welcome everybody. Thanks again for joining. I appreciate you're all trickling in, but while you're settling in, we will hear from Zainab as part of the data review. And then Kim Amato is joining us today to go over the tipping point and the importance of securing our furniture and household items. If there's time, we will go through the QI corner and next steps. So welcome in the chat. If you can do so safely, please share your name, your practice, and a positive experience from SEEK so far. And Zainab, I can stop sharing for data.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen? Are you able to see my screen?
Not yet.
No?
Good.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you everybody for submitting your data. We understand that there were some difficulties with the iPads and some of the practices. We appreciate you sending your paper surveys in. For those of you that have submitted their patient totals, thank you so much for doing that. I just want to remind everybody the reason that we're asking for that data and the importance of that data. So we really want to see how you're performing in terms of screening. So we want to see, of all of your patients that are coming in for these types of visits, what percentage of those, how many of those patients are receiving the survey. And the results of these surveys can tell you, how your patient population is doing, where the majority of their needs are. And then that can help you with other methods of trying to help them, like providing resources specific to those topics, because you realize that a lot of your patient population has a need regarding those topics. So again, if there's any difficulty in providing that data, or if you think that you'll be submitting it late, please let us know. And if there's anything that we can do to help, again, please let us know, and we'll be glad to do whatever we can on our side. So today I'm going to go over the data for January. It's also going to include the baseline that we presented in our first action period call. This is what the slides are going to look like for the majority of our action period calls in terms of data. It's just going to have that additional 1 month of 1 or 2 months of data, just depending on when we meet. So our first topic is social needs. And so for screening, every patient that completed or that started the survey completed all of the questions. And so that's what the screening rate is, or the percentage of patients that were screened. And then of those patients, some of them may have indicated needs for specific questions. That would be the counseling rate. Again, I just want to remind everybody that if you're providing them with the AAP resource, technically they're considered counseled for those specific areas, because we have provided different links and different QR codes for different topic areas within our resource sheet. So please give yourself credit if you're giving them those AAP resources that we provided. So the counseling rate for the younger age group in January was a little bit lower than we were seeing for the older age group. We also saw a lot more patients that were in the younger age group. So that does make a little bit of sense there. But we're hoping that in the next month, in February, we can increase that birth to 12 months rate a little bit higher towards where we're seeing the older age group, the 13 months to 5 years. Next is the family needs. So anything like maternal depression, if the primary caregiver needs help taking care of their child, family needs, those are included within the family needs. Again, we are seeing that the majority, or almost all of the patients that are starting the screening tool are completing all of the questions. We did have a patient or two in the older age group that did not complete the survey. I think they answered like 1 or 2 questions and then they decided that they didn't want to complete it. So that's why we're seeing a 99% there. But for family needs, we are seeing a lot better counseling rates for the younger age group. There was a little bit of a decrease for the older age group, but still performing pretty well overall for all of the practices. Home safety, this is our biggest topic. So this includes topics like what we're going to have our talk about today, like securing furniture to the wall, whether or not they have CPR training and stuff like that. Again, we did see 1 or 2 patients in the older age group that did not complete the survey. So again, it's reflected here at the 99%. Counseling, there's a lot more needs for this topic. So I understand that it'll be a lot more difficult to get that counseling rate up. But again, if you're providing them with a resource sheet, then please give yourself credit if you didn't have a chance to speak with them verbally or have a verbal counseling session with them, then providing them with that resource sheet would suffice. Car seat safety. I did see a little bit of low numbers here in terms of counseling. Again, screening, doing pretty great. Everyone's answering the questions that they need to. Counseling is where I felt like any of the practices are having difficulty with this topic. Again, we do have some resources in our resource sheet about car seat safety. So please keep that in mind. I think a few practices had like one patient that had a need and then that patient wasn't counseled. And so that really brought that number down a little bit. So this is just, again, you'll receive your individual level data for your own practice, hopefully by the end of the week. But you'll have a chance to look at how you're performing and why that reflects here on the overall level. So we're really hoping to see this number increase potentially in February. Safe sleep, again, we're seeing, very well in terms of screening, counseling, again, about 80%. We're hoping to get that improved or increased a little bit, but overall still doing very well. The resources provided, again, it can include any of the resources. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an AAP resource. It could be any resource that you have in your practice. If you've always been giving your patients any of those resource sheets, please continue to do so and record that in the data. Moving forward, these are slides that we did not present in the previous action period call. After each survey, the caregiver after each appointment, the caregiver can complete this caregiver feedback survey. And it asks questions just based on the needs that they indicated. So if they say that they had a need, they're asked if they've received resources, they're asked if they want to make a change and the likelihood of change. So of all of the caregivers that completed the survey, 92% said that they are willing to make some sort of change. So again, out of all the families or out of all the caregivers that completed the survey, 92% said that they were going to make some sort of change in any of the needs questions that they had or any of the needs that they indicated. Here is looking at the needs specifically. So we're not looking at the caregiver, we're looking at their needs of all of the needs of all of the caregivers that completed the survey. So their plan to change. This data represents the percent of needs that caregivers are planning to change. So of all of the needs that the caregivers indicated, they're willing to change on 86% of those. And they do not plan to make a change on 14% of those needs. And again, if anyone has questions, you can either put them in the chat or we have one more slide to go through and you can definitely ask questions or please let us know. And then the last thing is the likelihood of change or of those questions that they said or of those needs that they said that they have, what likelihood do they have to make a change? So are they ready to make a change? Are they seriously considering making a change? Do they want to make a change? They're just not quite ready. This is what this data represents. So of those needs that the family indicates that they have, what is their likelihood or where do they fall on a scale in terms of how likely they are to make that change. The majority, almost 50%, said that they're ready to make a change. And then seriously considering change, that's another 24%. So the majority of the family or the caregivers that completed the survey of their needs, almost the majority of them, a little bit less than 75%, of those needs are willing to be, the families are willing to have a change on. I understand that it can be a little bit confusing. So again, if you have questions, please let us know. 21% of the needs, the caregiver is indicating that they're thinking about making a change. And then for should make a change but not quite ready, we're at 5%. And then no thought of changing is at 7%. So I think that the caregivers are doing pretty well in terms of their likelihood to make a change for those needs. Again, the resource sheet that we provide and that you also provide gives them a lot of information on any of those needs that they're indicating that they have. Yeah, if anyone has any questions or if anyone feels confused about any of the data that we've just shared, please let us know. Brooke, I can hand it back over to you. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Zainab, thanks. Nothing has come through yet, but like Zainab said, you can always reach out via email. We're happy to go over this at any time. Zainab, I have hope in the caregivers and their willingness to make a change or at least consider.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing. So Brooke, you can take your screen back. But again, individual level data is going to be provided. So you can see as a practice how you performed.
Yeah, absolutely. That will be coming out as soon as it is available. And then we are always willing to have conversations and answer questions on that data when you see it. Zainab,
Right.
thank you so much.
Thank
you. should be able to play the video too, hopefully.
Okay, all right, very good. So you can move to the next one. So this is the dresser that fell on Megan. It happened in the early morning hours while we were sleeping. We did not hear it fall, probably because it fell on top of her onto a carpeted floor. She was unable to cry because her airway was compressed by the weight of the dresser on her. This was made by a high-end juvenile furniture manufacturer. It was part of a nursery set. It is solid maple, except for the back, which is that thin press board, which of course made it front and top heavy. The 3-drawer section is only 32 inches high, and the slightly higher version, part of the dresser, is only 35 inches high. Megan only weighed 28 pounds. The dresser weighs at least 150. We haven't actually weighed it, but it takes 2 adults to move it. It's quite heavy. You can go ahead, Brooke. So as I rocked her for the last time in the emergency room that morning, I promised her she'd be the last one to die this way. And unfortunately, she wasn't. And in fact, hundreds have died since she did. And that promise really led me on a journey to learn way more than I ever wanted to learn about furniture and how it tips over and how hard it was to fix the problem. So yeah, I really thought it would be easy, and it wasn't. But this quote by Lily Tomlin resonates with me, and it probably resonates with all of you too. And that is, I always thought someone should have done something about that. And then I realized I am somebody. And I kind of took it upon myself to be that somebody. So what do the statistics tell us? And more importantly, what don't they tell us? I will say that all of the statistics here are from the Consumer Product Safety Commission's tip over report. The most recent one was published about a year ago this month. So we know that about every 53 minutes, someone, usually a child, is rushed to the emergency room because of a tip over. And this picture and several of the other ones that you'll see in this presentation were sent to me by parents who caught their kids in the act. So this is like real life situation. This is not staged. And, you know, if you do the math, every 53 minutes is about 24 people a day that are going to the emergency room because of tip overs. Tip overs have killed at least 608 people since 2000, mostly children. And again, if you do the math, that works out to a child dying about every 2.5 weeks. The picture in the background here is of the aftermath of a tip over. Again, this was a real life situation. You can see there's a little pink TV there. Thankfully, this child was okay, but her parent sent me the photo to show what happened. This just breaks down the statistics a little bit more. And if you look at the deaths in particular, for the 10-year period from 2013 to 2023, there were 217 fatalities. Most of them were children under 18, and the vast majority of those were children under 6. There were 6 adults, however, that died from a tip over, and 56, which is 26% of the total, were seniors over 60. And I point that out because I think we're seeing, and probably will continue to see, more multi-generational families living together, right? As the baby boomers get older, I think we're going to see more parents moving in with their kids and living with their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. So you're really protecting the whole family when you're talking about preventing tip overs. So where do tip overs happen? And again, this data comes from the CPSC's report. We know that from an injury perspective, 60% of injuries, and again, this is ER-treated injuries, happen in the home. 8% happen in a public setting. So that could be a store, a hotel, a church, a school, childcare facilities, those sorts of things. And for 32%, the location was not specified in the report. I would venture to say most of those were in the home, however. As far as fatalities go, the vast majority happen in the home, and the vast majority of those happen in a bedroom. Not necessarily the child's bedroom, though that is common, but in a bedroom. 15% happen in like a family room or a living room, but not the bedroom. And 16% in other rooms, so perhaps a kitchen or a dining room. For 25% of those fatality reports, the room was not specified. And again, I would infer that most of those were a bedroom or a family room. We know that 4% of fatalities were in a public setting, and 2%, again, the location wasn't specified. So what tips over? The vast majority of the time, it's furniture. And specifically dressers, wardrobe cabinets, other typical bedroom furniture, but also tables, bookcases, shelving units, and cabinets. And we're seeing more now incidents with recliners, which also pose an entrapment hazard, and Murphy beds, to the point that one of the voluntary standard organizations that I'm a part of is starting to look at writing safety standards for both recliners and Murphy beds because they don't exist at the moment. And then there's entertainment furniture and less commonly like tool storage. If you're familiar with like those Craftsman tool storage units with multiple drawers, those have tipped over as well. Second most commonly are televisions. Sometimes it's just the TV. Sometimes it's the TV and the furniture on which that TV sits. The fatalities due to televisions were largely attributed to the old tube style TVs. So when they started collecting this data back in the early 2000s, most people had that style of TV. As flat screens have become more popular, there are fewer fatalities associated in the most recent years with television tip overs, but a lot of times people replace that flat screen. We replace that tube TV with a flat screen and don't get rid of the tube TV. They put it in a child's room on a dresser or in a playroom or a family room, oftentimes on a piece of furniture not designed to hold that style of TV. Appliances also contribute to tip over injuries and fatalities, though much less commonly than furniture or televisions. And it's often stoves. Stoves do come with clamps that they're supposed to be attached to the floor or to the wall when they're installed. Refrigerators also do pose a tip over hazard. Less commonly, dishwashers and microwaves. Microwaves are usually on like a baker's rack or an island that can travel around the kitchen. And then, sort of occasional reports of outdoor furniture like soccer nets or bicycle racks tipping over. And this just breaks down, the CPSC data on what killed these children over the past essentially, 20-ish years. 23% were just TVs. And again, those were, back in the early 2000s, most likely. 71% of fatalities involved furniture of some kind. 25% of those included a TV on top of the furniture. And 15% of fatalities were appliances. So I want to point out, because this is one of the ways you can help, is that we have a data dilemma. The tip over incidents are significantly underreported. Most of the information that the CPSC gets is from the NICE hospital system, which, if you're not familiar, is about 100 hospitals in the country that the CPSC contracts with to get injury data from the emergency room. And they send reports. And it's supposed to be representative of the country as a whole, but of course, most other emergency rooms, the physicians and the providers don't know how or why reporting those incidents are so important. So we know we're missing information. There's also no requirement for medical examiners to indicate on a death certificate what the cause of death was due to. It could be because they don't know, or it could be because some do and some don't. Megan's death certificate indicates positional asphyxiation because her bureau fell on her, but I've talked to other parents who it just says asphyxiation or blunt force trauma, and it doesn't say because the furniture fell on them. There's a website I'm going to talk about a little bit later called saferproducts.gov. It is a CPSC website, and it's the easiest way to report a tip over or any other product hazard injury or concern. And like I said earlier, the folks who are seeing the kids who are injured from tip overs don't know who to report it to, why to report it, or how. And that means we're missing, that data. We have ER, we have, our best estimates from ER treated injuries. We have the death data, but we're missing a whole lot of minor injuries or near misses that aren't captured at all. And I know personally, parents tell me all the time, oh, this happened to my child, last week or 5 years ago. And I say, did you ever report it? And they say, to who? So we're going to talk a little bit more about why that's important. And something to keep in mind too, parents are often really reluctant to talk about any incident in which their child was injured or, God forbid, killed for a multitude of reasons. One is it isn't easy. They're grieving. They may feel a certain degree of guilt, even if it wasn't their fault. They may be depressed. They may have PTSD. They may have had a negative experience with some person or the media or a physician. I can tell you, you probably are aware, if a child dies at home, the parents are investigated. The police detectives came to talk to us at the hospital. Our house was gone through with a fine-tooth comb while we were gone. I have fellow tip-over parents where, Child Protective Services came and took away their other children for a day or two until they were exonerated, because people don't understand how common tip-overs are and that they aren't a factor of bad parental supervision. They're a factor of physics. And this is just another, classic iceberg picture of the data problem. What manufacturers in the CPSC see is the data that's reported, and what's under the surface is all the other data I just talked about. So I went on a quest to try to fix this problem and keep my promise to Maggie. I'm not going to go over this slide, but I put it in there for those of you who might be interested, like what parent advocacy looks like. It truly is a labor of love. It is not for the faint of heart. I am a rare bird, especially to be doing this for 20 years. It's really hard. It's very time consuming and it's very frustrating. And people say really hurtful things along the way. But this is kind of how I got to where I am today. What I do want to emphasize is there is something very powerful about parent advocates collaborating. So in 2018, and social media made this easier, but in 2018, a bunch of us parents who had all lost children to a tip over got together and we called ourselves Parents Against Tip Overs. And the two pictures are ones obviously at the CPSC headquarters in DC. The other picture is at ASTM headquarters. ASTM is an international voluntary standard organization. And if you look around you right now, wherever you are, chances are most of the things within your line of sight have a voluntary safety standard associated with them, even though you probably wouldn't know that. So Pat went to Washington and we accomplished what everybody said was impossible in about 5 years. And I think we really opened people's eyes that, there's more than one way to solve a problem. And we basically weren't going to take no for an answer. So again, this is a slide that you can read at your leisure, but suffice it to say that Pat engaged with every organization that had responsibility for making furniture safer, and all of them had failed. And those involved that ASTM voluntary standard organization, which was largely controlled by the manufacturers who didn't want a standard of any kind because that would impact their bottom line. And they actively fought against us for years. It included engaging with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, who failed to recognize that that voluntary standard was inadequate and did not do their job because they're able to create mandatory standards on their own, and they didn't. So we called them out and said, you're not doing your job, which is to protect consumers. We are consumers. Our children died. You need to do a better job, and we're here to hold you accountable. And a couple other things. We did a lot of media interviews. We were interviewed for a Netflix documentary. We collaborated with Consumer Reports and Kids in Danger, two organizations I'm sure that you're familiar with. And they advised us, mentored us, helped us to accomplish what we ultimately did. And then we took on Congress and we lobbied them hard, at first on our own, and then, obviously with the help of our senators and representatives who introduced bills. And then finally invited the furniture industry to the table when they realized that we weren't kidding. And we were going to do this with or without them, that they came to join us. And what we did was we got a law passed that made furniture safer. So that law's, yep, you were right, the Sturdy Act one, yeah, is called the Sturdy Act, and it's behind me on the wall in a frame. It stands for Stop Tip Overs of Unstable Risky Dressers on Youth. It was introduced into 3 different sessions of Congress, so it took more than 6 years, but it was signed into law by President Biden on December 29th in 2022. It directed the CPSC to look at a newly upgraded voluntary standard, which we spearheaded that project. And if they felt it adequately protected children, to adopt it as the new law, which they did. And that law went into effect on September 1st, 2023. What it requires is that all CSUs, which stands for Clothing Storage Unit and refers to dressers and other bedroom furniture that hold clothes, it applies to all clothing storage furniture 27 inches and taller, greater than 30 pounds in weight, and that contain greater than 3.2 cubic feet of enclosed storage volume. And that's just to kind of take nightstands out of the picture that don't meet those other requirements. And it's intended to protect children up to 72 months of age. This is just a picture of us celebrating passing the Sturdy Act and all the folks who helped us along the way to get it done. The Sturdy Act requires mandatory testing for safety and stability. And this is a picture of how that test is conducted. So it's tests to simulate the weight of a 72-month-old child, which is 60 pounds. So that those two blocks you see hanging on the top drawer with that yellow strap, that's the testing apparatus that each of those blocks is 30 pounds. So for a total of 60. It requires opening all the drawers before that weight is applied because children open more than one drawer when they're interacting with their dresser. It includes putting weight inside the drawers to simulate the weight of clothing. And there is a test to simulate carpet because carpet tends to cause the dresser to pitch forward just sitting on the floor. Sturdy also requires permanent warning labels on the furniture, warning of the danger of tip overs and that children should not climb. And it requires that an anti-tip device or a furniture anchor be included with the furniture. That also includes instructions for use and installation. And this is just more detail for those of you who are like, well, what exactly are the tests? This is taken right out of the standard. So how are manufacturers complying? A lot of them are just adding weight to the back of the furniture to make it more stable and pass those tests. Some are using interlock systems. So if you bought a dresser recently that now complies with Sturdy, you probably can't open more than one drawer at a time because of the interlock system. Some are making it so the doors don't open as far, which most consumers don't like. And then others are doing innovative designs, and IKEA is the leader in this. And this picture, if you look at the dresser in the picture, you'll see it's wider at the bottom. And that bottom drawer actually isn't attached at all. It comes completely out, which most children pull out and stand on the bottom drawer. So that diminishes the risk as well. And this is just a picture of 3 of the founders of PAT with IKEA at their announcement that they were selling only compliant furniture. So that was a great day. The CPSC is enforcing Sturdy, so there have already been several recalls of dressers sold since the standard went into effect that failed to meet the requirements. There was a massive furniture anchor recall about a year ago of zip tie style furniture anchors. They check at ports of entry. They spot check through ordering online and testing in their lab. They rely on reports to saferproducts.gov and then reports from manufacturers who are doing their own testing when their furniture comes in from whoever makes it overseas. And that's actually how most of the violations have been caught, which is great because that's what's supposed to happen. The picture here is a non-compliant dresser. And this dresser killed a 3-year-old girl. Her mom sent me a picture of the dresser to show me what it looked like. So this is really important. Despite everything I just said, the Sturdy Act only applies to new furniture that you've bought very recently. There are millions of pieces of furniture in everybody's home today that don't comply and pose a tip over risk. And the Sturdy Act isn't going to prevent 100% of tip overs, but it is going to protect children under 6 far better than any other standard did before. The only way to prevent a tip over is to anchor the furniture with drawers, doors, and shelves to the wall. And the hashtag we use on social media is anchor it. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Perhaps you've heard them, perhaps you've thought them. It won't happen to me. I'm always with or watching my children. Lies, by the way. You go to the bathroom, you sleep, you eat, you look at your phone. My kids won't climb. Maybe, maybe not. Megan could have climbed that dresser 50 times and I didn't know, or that could have been the first time. And that's just it. You don't know. I told them not to climb on the furniture. Okay, well, we tell our kids a lot of things. They don't necessarily understand the consequences or are thinking that when they want to get something. It only happens with cheap or IKEA furniture. Not true. My furniture is really stable and heavy, so it won't tip over. Not true. I don't want to put holes in my wall or in my furniture. I hear this a lot, and it is a valid concern for people who are renting, but you can fix holes in walls and holes in furniture. I'm going to walk around with this pain in my shattered heart forever, especially knowing now what I didn't know then, that a few dollars in a few minutes would have saved her life. And now everybody I tell her story to knows that, and you have the opportunity to protect your child from something I could not protect mine from. Even if it happened, I'd be there to stop it. You can be in the same room and be powerless to stop a tip over from happening. It is so fast. My dresser was expensive and well made, so it's safe. So is Megan's. My dresser wasn't anchored and I survived, so my kids will be fine. And you hear this a lot, you know, from parents and grandparents alike. So how do we combat that misinformation? I'm here to tell you that while statistics and words might be something you all love, it doesn't motivate people to act because it's not going to happen to them. So they don't need to pay attention to statistics. All that bad stuff happens to other people. Emotions are what motivates people to act. You have to tell the story. They have to feel what it would be like for it to happen to them. They need to see how fast it can happen. So videos are really helpful. Identifying with a photo, you know, if your daughter looks like Megan, you're probably going to identify with my story a lot more than if you had a 10-year-old boy, right? They have to identify with the potential emotion of loss. And I discovered this. I wrote a blog back in 2012 for my family who pissed me off, quite frankly, because every year on Megan's Angelversary, I asked them to share her story and ask people to anchor their furniture. And they weren't. I'm on social media, they're on social media. They weren't sharing. They weren't saying, hey, Kim, how are you doing? It must be a hard day for you. We're thinking of you. We're thinking of Maggie, like crickets. So I got pissed. I wrote a blog. I shared it on social media. Somebody shared it. I shared it on Megan's Hope. I shared it, you know, got shared a lot of places and it went viral. And literally in 2 weeks, 1,000 people wrote to me and said, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'm bawling my eyes out. I called my husband. I told him to come home with anchors. I'm not putting my child to bed until that thing's anchored to the wall. Father's writing to me, I am blubbering like a baby. I am so sorry this happened to you. I told my wife we didn't need to anchor the furniture and I feel horrible. I'm going to go do it right now. And I was like, oh my God. All I had to do was share how much it sucks to have a kid die and what it's like to remember that every year. Turns out that was what did it. So why do tip overs happen? Yeah, honestly, physics. You're not faster than gravity, and physics is different every single time. Think about yourself. Every time you go to get dressed in the morning and you open the drawers to your dresser, are you standing exactly the same way? Are you opening just one drawer? Are you pulling on it at the same place? Do you open more than one drawer? Are you standing sideways? Are you leaning? Did you lose your balance? What's in the drawer? Did you get distracted? Like so many things are different every time. Tip overs are not a problem of bad parenting or supervision. Like I said, you can be in the same room and you can't prevent it from happening. We have to remember play is the work of children. We want them to open their dresser drawers and get themselves dressed, but we want them to be safe doing so. I want you all to go home today and for every dresser you have, open every single drawer, take 2 fingers and push down in the middle of the top drawer, gradually increasing the pressure until you can get it to tip over if it's not already anchored to the wall. And I bet you'll be surprised at how easy it is to tip it over. You cannot tell by looking at a piece of furniture if it's a tip over risk. The reality is it doesn't matter how much it cost, doesn't matter who made it or where you bought it, doesn't matter how heavy or light it is, doesn't matter how old or new it is, doesn't matter how tall, skinny, whatever. It doesn't matter. If it's not properly anchored to the wall, it could tip over and seriously injure or kill somebody. So how fast does it happen? Can you hit play, Brooke? These are real incidents.
Pick out all
none
your
of these
jammies.
children were seriously hurt.
A fat one!
Good job. Those go in the very top drawer.
Top drawer.
Powerful. So the CPSC created that PSA at my request. I hounded them for years. I'm like, you need to show real life stories. Thankfully, none of those children were seriously hurt, but those were all moms with cell phones, nanny cam footage, and they got permission to use all of those to create that PSA. And you saw that mom was right there, like a couple feet away, watching her child put away the clothes, and she threw the phone down as it started to tip over. So there are challenges to anchoring furniture. We know that only about 30% of people have anchored even just one piece of furniture in their home, and that's from a Consumer Reports study in 2021. We think that number might be closer to 40% now, but that's not nearly enough. And a lot of people will say, I know I'm supposed to anchor my furniture, but I didn't because XYZ, right? Furniture anchors are not easily available at local stores. You can find them, but not consistently, but they're widely available online. Many people lack the tools, the knowledge, the motivation, or the confidence to properly install them. Renters fear it will violate their lease and they'll lose their security deposit, to which I always say, talk to your landlord, explain your concern. If you ever need data, call on me. I'm happy to provide it. And then say to them, look, so if you're not going to let me do this and I don't do it and my kid dies, you're okay with being responsible for that, right? And that usually gets them to say, okay, fine, just patch the holes when you move out, right? And furniture anchors are not created equal. They are not regulated. There are no mandatory testing requirements. Some are better than others, but most people don't know that. And there are a lot of knockoff brands out there now that look just like name brands, that could give parents a false sense of security because they're made from inferior products and they're much more likely to fail. I sit on the ASTM Standard Committee for Furniture Safety, but I also chair a task group specific to furniture anchors. And we're doing some testing now. And we've just started with plastic zip ties. And we're finding that over time, they do break, sometimes right out of the package before you even get it installed. Sometimes it's a year or two later. I've had multiple types of furniture anchors fail on me over the past 20 years. And the more I learn about materials, the more I realize we really need to do a better job educating parents about what anchors are good and what are not. So what to look for? We try to avoid plastic if we can. It's not always possible because they are the least expensive kind. Metal anchors are generally stronger than plastic ones. Metal L brackets are really cheap. They're really strong and they're really effective. And you can buy them at your local Home Depot or Lowe's or hardware store. You have to buy the screws to go with them, but just ask somebody that works there, what kind of screws do I need to put this into a wood stud, and they'll show you. Choose brand name ones that make other childproofing products over ones you don't. So if you're going to Amazon and you're looking for furniture anchors, and you see a Safety First anchor and you see another one that's got a Chinese manufacturer, choose the Safety First anchor. Just because I know personally what materials they use and that they are stronger than what a lot of the other brands use. Right now, even the furniture that, even the anchors that come with furniture have no testing requirements. The only test that they're required to pass is they have to be put together, and then the manufacturer holds one end of the restraint and puts very slowly a 60-pound weight on the other end for 10 seconds. And if it doesn't break, then it passes. That doesn't simulate how anchors are used in the home and doesn't account for, how they, may degrade over time. As a general rule, you need one anchor for about every 50 pounds your furniture weighs. That includes the weight of the furniture, everything in it, plus that 60 pounds to simulate a child climbing. My personal favorite's called the Hangman furniture anchor, and it is tested by the manufacturer to hold 400 pounds. And there's a Consumer Reports article that has some really good information. They did their own testing a couple months ago, and I highly recommend you take a look at that. These are just some pictures of furniture anchors. So if we go from left to right and top to bottom, the one on the maroon background is just a little thing I made up with different types of anchors attached to it. I take it to safety fairs and show folks. The white strap anchors are the safety first anchors. The one below, the ones all attached to the 2x4 is the Hangman, my personal favorite. And the one next to that is made by Quickhold, which also performed really well in Consumer Reports testing. And don't forget about TVs. I love the picture in the middle. This side of your TV could save a life. Flat screens come with notches in them specifically for attaching the TV strap anchors to them. And you can attach those to the wall or to the furniture on which it sits if you're not able to mount your flat screen directly on the wall. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have to worry about flat screens because they're so light. The average 50-inch flat screen weighs between 30 and 50 pounds. And I tell parents to think of the weight of a TV in terms of bowling balls. So a 30-pound TV is like dropping 3 bowling balls onto your child. And that visual usually gets them to realize how important it is to anchor it. Anchoring is really easy, takes less than $20 and about 20 minutes to do. The CPSC's website, anchorit.gov, has great information. Please do visit them. You can download this poster, to share with parents and to, post in offices and in waiting rooms. And they have videos and step-by-step instructions as well. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Charlie's House, but one of the Pat parents, Brett Horn, he and his wife created Charlie's House in memory of their son, Charlie. And it is the first in the nation safety demonstration house. So please do visit his website. It's amazing. It's a great resource for the parents and families you serve. But I also encourage you to download this flyer from the website and to share it with families, post it in waiting rooms, post it in exam rooms. It's really got a lot of information on it, and it's got a little QR code embedded in it, so people can just click the QR code and it will take them to Charlie's House to learn more. These are just a couple of resources for videos on how to anchor. Consumer Reports has done one, the CPSC has one, and IKEA has a great one. The IKEA one's longer, but it's really kind of humorous and really goes into detail. So it's one of my favorites. So how can you help? And this is a great picture, right? What's that little one doing? Standing on the handle of the drawer. So didn't open the drawers, climbed up the outside, and is hanging there looking at all the cute little figures on top that I'm sure that he wants. This is how it happens. So leverage the information already out there and accessible to you. The AAP has some information. They have information on tip overs on the Healthy Children site. There's infographics like this one, and utilize social media as well. Collaborate if you have a Safe Kids in your area or an injury-free coalition for kids, children's hospitals. Use our website and the information there. Use Charlie's House, use the CPSC. You can go to the CPSC's website and subscribe to recalls for juvenile products or whatever you want. There's a lot of different product categories, so you get recall notices. Because don't rely on the news. The news only reports massive recalls. They don't report these little one-offs, typically that are smaller, but still pose hazards to kids. And follow and encourage the families you work with to follow pediatricians who have a social media presence. So some of you may already be familiar with PediMom. She has a very evidence-based social media presence. She has podcasts. She works a lot with parent advocates like myself. She did interview me for her podcast. And then there's also Dr. Megan Beach, who goes by Dr. Beach Gem 10. She has a huge following, like millions of people, TikTok, Instagram, but they cross-post to other social media platforms. And she did a post in the summer about a pediatric patient. She's an ER doc that came in with a tip over injury, and she happened to do some research. She cited Megan's Hope. And a lot of people reached out to me and said, did you see this? Did you see this? And I did comment and sent her some resources as well. So these are great resources for all kinds of child safety, not just tip over. And how can you help? This is just a screenshot of the furniture tip over page on Healthy Children. And I do need to update it. I worked with the AAP to write it. And I am the parent to parent story, but it was written before Sturdy passed. So I do need to update it. But make tip over education like part of standard childproofing education. So at well visits, put it on your websites. Like I said, post information in your waiting rooms and in your exam rooms. When my kids were little, they're adults now, but when my kids were little, I read everything on the wall ad nauseum because there wasn't much else to do while you were waiting, right? Add tip over prevention resources to your websites, to your social media. Share it with your family and friends as well as professionally. Like I said, collaborate with local child safety organizations in your area. Include tip over prevention and power of working with parent advocates with any conferences that you might put on or attend, and educate medical students as well. I've had the opportunity over the years to educate some medical students along with other parent advocates on sort of emerging child safety hazards. And they're always so grateful. And again, the story is powerful, not just with families, but with physicians as well. And then consider getting involved in standard development if that's something that interests you, because we could use you. Saferproducts.gov. So this is the website I alluded to earlier. It is a CPSC, Consumer Product Safety Commission website. And it's the place where you should go to report a product malfunction. Maybe your toaster didn't work right. Like you report that to the CPSC, but you're in a position to see injuries due to product safety hazards. So tip overs is obviously what I'm talking about, but you might have heard about button batteries and water beads and safe sleep issues. Remember the Fisher-Price Rock and Play recall, right? The CPSC really relies on reports from you and me and parents and doctors and emergency rooms to get that data, because that's how recalls happen. So if they're not getting the data, they can't protect other people. And that's really huge, right? IKEA is a great example. IKEA's been, had multiple recalls, and they resisted those recalls for a long time. The CPSC had to sue them to get them to recall the Malm dresser, killed 3 of the parents. And, it took them a long time to kind of realize the error of their ways and to come to the table and collaborate with us on better furniture safety. But I mean, to their credit, they did. But if those incidents went unreported, they never would have been recalled. So you are all in a position to report a product safety injury. There doesn't even have to be an injury. It could be a near miss. It could be anecdotal conversation that you had with your neighbor. Your neighbor could report it, but so could you. The CPSC does not publish data until it's vetted. They will redact pretty much anything identifying before they publish it. And if you as a physician or somebody who works with a family reports an incident that happened to somebody else, it won't get published, but that data still goes to good use. They have to have permission of the family or somebody in the family that it personally happened to publish that report. But it doesn't mean that the information you have shouldn't be reported and isn't important. And if you're interested in learning more about saferproducts.gov, I'm happy to connect you with the consumer ombudsman. He's amazing, from the CPSC, and he could do a whole presentation just on that. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. And these are just some resources for you. I did hyperlink them in the in the presentation, but if you need them, in an email or something like that, I can certainly send you that as well. And one more quick 1-minute video for you.
Megan she was vibrant.
Shane is my son, 2 years old, forever 2.
Chance loved to dance and sing.
I put Shane down for his nap, just like any other day.
I woke to my husband screaming, Kim, Kim, oh God, Kim. And that's when I saw the dresser was on top of her. He said she was under her dresser, she was under her dresser.
I went to wake him from his nap at dinner time, and I found him under his dresser. Our family didn't know about anchoring furniture. It's a hidden danger in the home.
Instead of putting a hole in the wall, I have to carry this hole in my heart. You're not supposed to bury your child. If we had known the steps that we could have taken, it wouldn't have happened. Don't take a chance on this happening to you, because no parent should ever have to go through this. Please anchor it.
That was a PSA, obviously, the CPSC did with myself and 2 other tip-over
Megan
moms. And the idea was to share the stories, in a minute. And it was many, many years ago. The Anchor It campaign's 10 years old now, and that was when it was launched. So this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out at any time if you ever have any questions, you need any resources, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have now if anybody has anything.
Kimberly, thank you so much for turning your adversity into strength and power and change. We really appreciate it. There is a question that came through the chat. What if furniture stands against glass or tile and you don't want to drill through that? What is the option there? Is it suction cups or?
That's a great question. So obviously you probably don't want to drill through tile. There is an adhesive style anchor. What I don't know is whether it would work on tile or glass. I could probably find out from the manufacturer because I do know who it is. It's called Tip Knot. And it would attach to both the furniture and the tile or glass with an adhesive. So I would want to probably make sure that that adhesive can be cleaned up afterwards and not leave a mark on the glass. The other option I would say would be to anchor it to the floor if you can, with L brackets. And I would say in that case, probably all 4 legs or all 4 corners of the bottom would be my recommendation.
Helpful, thank you. Any other quick questions from the group? We can also connect you with Kimberly.
Brooke, do you mind advancing just one more slide?
Sure.
Thank you. We always like to share pictures of our babies. So these are the parents of Pat and our children. So again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. I hope you learned something today, and I hope the information is helpful. Brooke, I did just want to mention, I know you mentioned you had got furniture anchors. So we're in the process of testing, but I had actually ordered a couple of the For Our Kitties anchors. And this is what happened when I bent it 30 times. So I went like this, and I counted how many times it took to break it. Now, granted, that may not be how the stress is applied to it, but just as an FYI, this is why we're doing the testing, and we're trying to come up with, better requirements for anchors. But we won't have anything for another year or 2, probably, honestly, because of the way consensus processes work and the testing that we have to do. But, always advise parents to periodically check to make sure that those anchors are still doing their job. Don't attach and forget.
That's great advice. Yeah. And thank you for looking into the brand that we sent out. Could we, since they have them in their hands and we already sent them out, is using those better than nothing?
Yes, sure. It is definitely better than nothing. And I know a lot of families, can't afford to go out and buy the aftermarket anchors. So something is definitely better than nothing. But just caveat that with please check, at least every 6 months, right? When you change the batteries in your smoke detector, check your furniture anchors, or something like that.
Thank you. Great advice. And to check the batteries too. Appreciate that.
Right?
Thank you,
All right,
Kimberly, for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We are at time. And I will send out the things we didn't get to and the information from Kimberly as well. So thank you all. Have wonderful weeks. Appreciate it.
Thank you.